live stream, you might notice something a little different here. There's both of us tonight.
Hi.
I'm just gonna check something on the audio here. How are you all doing? One sec. Can you guys hear us okay? Can we get a 5x5 if you can hear us? So we've got quite a few people here in the chat. Winter Homestead is here. Used to be Angry Homesteader. So if you haven't caught the name chains, definitely check out her channel. Oh yeah, you guys can hear us. Awesome.
5x5.
Good stuff. Nate's here. Penny Pinching. How are you doing? Fed Up American. Good to see you. Cold War Prepper. Thanks for stopping by. I loved your prepper haul video that you put out today. Who else is here? Well, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. And you've all already heard by now, but unfortunately, we've lost a legend in the prepper community. Unfortunately, North Shore Preparedness has passed away, Sean. So we just wanted to acknowledge that and how everyone's probably feeling right now, and what a loss that is. So a lot of people have posted about it. And yeah, it's really sad news, but we can keep his memory going by going and watching some of his old live streams and some of his videos and the good content that he has up on his channel. Yeah, that's true, Winter. He is in a good place. He's missed. So we have Mr. Alpine here in the live stream tonight for a little while, and we are our time is constricted, but we wanted to talk about a few of the questions that we have got on some of the videos and give Mr. Alp here a chance to answer some of the questions. And the first one is, can you tell us how you got into farming, your farming background?
Yeah, of course. Well, I didn't really get into farming. It was kind of just it's where I grew up in northwest England. So I grew up on a cattle and sheep hill farm, which is kind of classified as an upland grazing farm. So we used to the sheep would graze, cattle would graze, then we do the harvesting of the silage and hay in the summer months for the winter storage, and the cattle would get housed, and sheep would come to more lowland paddocks for the winter. So yeah, I grew up as a son of a farmer. That's how I became a farmer.
And then what happened in Australia?
Yeah, in my early 20s, I left the UK home farm. I went to Australia on my own, and it was kind of an exercise of my dad to give me basically a shoe out the door to say, look, before you ever consider coming to work on the home farm, I want you to go and experience other stuff in life and maybe go and work on other farms. And if you still want to come back and work on the home farm, you can after that. So in my early 20s, I ventured off to Australia, and I worked on a number of properties in Australia, New South Wales, predominantly southern Queensland initially. And they were large cotton and wheat arable type properties. So I worked there for about 18 months to 2 years prior to going to get my helicopter training and license done in Australia.
So Cold War Prepper has a question. What enticed y'all to move to Canada? And I am Canadian, so that was easy for me.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Mr. Alp is also Canadian, but can you please tell us how you moved to Canada?
Yeah. I moved over here in early 2006, and the primary reason for doing so was quite a shortage at the time of rotary wing pilots in Canada, experienced rotary wing pilots. So there was quite a pull from New Zealand, Australia, of guys with a number of hours to come over to Canada and fill in the gap that the Canadian industry at the time couldn't support, just for demand. So a number of people I knew came over to Canada, and it was something I always wanted to do, which was going back to the Northern Hemisphere and to get closer to family members that were still in the United Kingdom, so less of a commute, let's say, from seeing them. Because I found Australia was obviously a long way from the UK, and yeah, so that's how I ventured over to Canada, was to pursue different work, different flying work, away from agriculture, but predominantly flying.
Hi, Jean. How are you doing? Good to see you. And you are wondering, Jean's wondering, where is her dog? Her dog, she
Just here.
just down here. Yeah. And so how did you transition into flying from working in Australia?
Well, that was pretty straightforward, really. I'd always wanted to get into aviation, but in the United Kingdom when I was younger, it was just too cost prohibitive to get into it. So I kind of put it aside for a while, and decided to to put it aside for a while in Australia, and get into flying after I acquired some time in Australia and gathered some money together. So it was pretty easy to just get into a flight school. The one I chose was just north of Brisbane, on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. It was a flight school that was well regarded. I'd taken some time out of the agricultural work I've been doing. Like I said, saved up some money and just put myself into the flight school and just fully immersed into it for about 6 months and came out of it with a license, 2 licenses actually.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Jean thinks that we would be sitting in the underground garden. It's pretty hard to fit in there 2 people, because when I was in there last week,
Jammed in.
I was jammed in there, and it was in front and behind me. I mean, we could.
Yeah.
Daniel is saying a 1-episode series on History Channel, Apocalypse Man, a former recon Marine, takes you through basic run through survive post-apocalypse collapse. It's worth a view. Okay, thanks for the heads up.
Check that out.
And the other question we had recently on a video was, is there a change in the aircraft when you fly at altitude?
Physically changing the aircraft? No, just the performance characteristics of any aircraft, really, at altitude. Rotary wing, it's just basically less dense air, less air for the blades to bite into to get lift, and less performance of the engine. So you got reduced fuel consumption at altitude just with the air fuel mixture. But basically it's, for us, for the higher altitude work, it's just your lift capability that's going to be reduced. So the only way you can get to where you're going at altitude is, if you need to go pick some people up, take as little fuel as you need for each specific task and mission. And that's the key, is to keep the aircraft as light as possible so you can get maximum performance at altitude.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks. The other thing that we've been talking about on the channel today was actually about dogs and dog breeds, and how many people considered the dog breed that they got, or did they get a dog based on companionship, just sort of whatever dog was available. And there's some really interesting responses Winter Homestead was talking about how, helpful the dogs that she has are for guarding and all that kind of stuff. And we're pretty big fan of the Blue Heeler. And that took a bit of research to choose that dog. And certain dogs, there's considerations. Like, for example, the short snouted dogs like pugs, you can't actually fly with them on most airlines because they get airway problems. So if you're trying to, move around that way or be mobile that way, it's a consideration.
Yeah, I think for us it was having exposure to the cattle dogs in Australia and getting a dog of a certain size that we wanted, characteristics, sturdiness, robustness, like very much an outdoors dog. I'd specifically had a lot of exposure to border collies, British sheepdogs, as a youngster. So getting something that was as smart as a collie but a little bit tougher, which was basically the cattle dog, was the pick of the options for us, and it's been good.
Yep. So, hi, Sassy Gal. How's it going? Good to see you. Daniel says prop planes are best. They are typically more durable than jet powered. Do you have anything to say about that?
No, that's not my area of knowledge, so I don't really have anything to say on that one.
Okay. Daniel also says, when society collapses, there will be plenty of animals, especially dogs. Be sure to have food set aside. Makes it easier to befriend them. And I think Alaska Prepper has quite a bit to say about dog food going bad and not overstocking dog food. I'd love to see more videos or hear more conversation about that, because of course, if we do have pets that we want to take care of and we don't have enough food for them over the long haul, then of course they're probably going to cut into the other food and affect everybody involved. So
yeah, it depends where you live. I mean, it's getting dog food. It's not going to be difficult if you live away from a urban area. You can always hunt for dog food.
Yeah. Hi, Arkwell, Man Survival. Good to see you. Sun Owl, how are things over on the coast? And Winter is saying that the oil in the dry dog food will spoil.
Yeah, makes sense.
And Coffee First says, my dog will get food before my husband. Yeah. So, and Jean is saying her dog is a rescue. A PETA picked her up based on the size and because she's so ugly and cute. Yeah, exactly. Doesn't really matter how.
I think everyone thinks their own dogs are cute, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is important because then you want to keep them around.
Yeah.
Hey, Prepper 101. Good to see you. Fed Up American says, I prep canned dog food. I buy a 24-pack of cans around every other month.
Yeah, I wonder how long the cans last. Like if it's going to be the same as a can of baked beans or something. It's probably good for 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. Or more.
Mm-hmm. Well, I bet you someone will be able to answer that in the comments. So Nate is wondering, what are you paying for gasoline per liter?
Right now where we are, I think regular is about 170, I'd say about 175 Canadian. And just picked up some diesel today for the skid steer I was using yesterday. And that was I think it was 205 for diesel, a liter. Canadian.
And yeah, thanks again, guys, for the questions. Big B is wondering, does flying reduce your commute time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Yeah. The projects I'm working on or I work on for my just day-to-day work are not close to home. So I have to take an airline plane to get to the job sites and then obviously just whatever helicopter stuff we're doing from there.
And can you can you tell people about the trip you just did? I think it was Ontario to Alberta and what that
Oh,
was
yeah.
like.
Yeah, we had to, prior to the holidays, the Christmas break here, I just had to take a helicopter for a T inspection, which for that specific model is a 600-hour inspection. So the machines we're flying we do a lot of, they're doing about 2 of those a year, just under 2 of them a year. So probably 13, 14 months for 1,200 hours, which is a lot of flight time per aircraft unit. And yeah, so those services come up regularly. So after the shift, just took the helicopter from northwest Ontario over to Calgary. So it was kind of a winter trek across the prairies and just normal kind of winter flying, freezing conditions and low vis at times. It was just a pretty normal winter 2-day trek across the country, but it's always nice to do. There was no rush, so it was good. It was fun.
And there's some pretty good stories that I've heard just about the preparedness aspect, because sometimes, I mean, he would have to land and just be wherever he is by himself. So you have to have certain supplies and things like that.
Yeah, we had to pack like spares with the helicopter, and I was on my own. So full winter covers for parking the helicopter outside at night, and heaters and plug-ins, and the aircraft's got a tennis kit, which is basically heat pads that go onto gearbox, engine oils, tail rotor gearbox oils, just the pads that heat the oils up overnight to keep them from freezing, which is a pretty good system.
Yeah. So we have had a lot of questions when the helicopter videos are posted. So this is a good chance. We're just kind of going through some of the questions, and I'm seeing there's some more coming up in the comments here. So if you have any, let us know, because we do, we're short on time, but we will definitely be happy to see your questions. Jean is saying, Aftershock, Everest and the Nepal earthquake, Netflix true story. There are a lot of helicopter rescues, very interesting. Have you done mountain climbers? And I believe you mean, have you rescued mountain climbers? And I will just like to say, because you did some work related to that earthquake, right?
Yeah,
and,
I did quite a bit.
So
not directly, like immediately after, but I was there, not too long after. It was about a year after, but there was a lot of work, reconstruction work from the earthquake damage throughout Nepal that we did. A lot of building materials, survey work, and general commutes for areas that were heavily affected. So, taking people to and from inaccessible parts of the country that were heavily affected. The level of remoteness for some communities in Nepal it's hard to fathom, like how far from anywhere they are and how extreme the terrain is to get to and from what one might consider a populated center. So whether that's for them farmers to take their goods to sell or trade, it's they're very tough people, like amazingly tough, hardy.
And then the second part of the question is, have you rescued mountain climbers?
Yes. Yeah, quite a few. Yeah, both like physically landing to pick them up, and also a number of long line rescues where we've had a rescuer on the end of a line fly in with the helicopter, and the rescuer hooks up the mountain climber, and we extract them from wherever they're situated at the time, down to like a base camp or a staging area or wherever it might be, to get them if they need to go to additional medical care.
And I was there, and they look like what you imagine the mountain climbers look like, with the big puffy suits.
And we've also picked up deceased mountain climbers too, so a number of those as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, there was a comment on the video today asking if that's ever visible, and I think the person was kind of joking, but all jokes aside, it is very much a thing, right?
Yeah, it's just part of the business in Nepal. Like the extreme conditions are the amount of people and the extreme conditions have anywhere from, good results to bad results. So, and that goes for climbers, pilots. I've known a number of pilots deceased from their time in flying in Nepal. It's challenging.
So Daniel says, pilots, both fixed and rotary, shall be most valuable when things go bad. It's funny you should say that, because somebody actually made a video about us saying paramedics don't really know anything, and pilot and helicopters will be useless in SHTF. Do you want to comment on that?
What was mentioned that would be key, though? Like, what was the trait that was going to be very valuable? Like a social worker or something, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, social worker.
Anyway, I don't know. But, I mean, each aircraft, there can be a liability. If there's no... If somebody's trying to take an aircraft, they don't know how to operate it, then it's a catastrophic ending to that. There's going to be limiting factors, which is maintenance of aircraft. If they've been abandoned somewhere, you're not going to jump in and just take one. Serviceability, general condition. If an aircraft's been shot up, you don't know what components are damaged. And then also basically just fuel. Like if a situation is catastrophic, and it's like one might see in the movies, as much as you want to get somewhere, like fuel is going to be a restricting factor. So yeah, you might have a win and you might not. But I think if a person needed to get out of like a city, and there's aircraft laying around, and somebody has skills to take one to get their family away from an immediate situation, it's feasible. I mean, it could work, I guess.
Gary in northern BC is wondering, do you do long line for emergency patients?
Yeah, there's Class D, which is a category of human external cargo for long line operations. You can do long line rescues, like with a single engine helicopter, and other operations you need twin engine capability in case you have a failure. So you need a redundant system to do that kind of work. So to answer your question, yes, there's a number of companies in Canada that do like mountain rescue, long line rescue. It's definitely a not too uncommon thing. Quite a few people do it.
And Prepper 101 has a theme in his jokes, and you will catch it here. Could you use a helicopter to drop my mother-in-law off on the top of Mount Everest? I'll pay double.
Mm-hmm. I think there's only one helicopter that's landed the skids on the top of Mount Everest, which was the Eurocopter's launch promotion of the B3, which was a type of helicopter, which is similar to the type that we fly in, the older version of the ones that we now fly in Nepal and in Canada. But dropping somebody off up there would be, it'd be interesting. It's doable, yeah, for the right price.
So the short answer is yes.
Yeah, I guess you could do it, yeah.
Martin, good to see you. Okay, Martin's wondering, when do you not fly a helicopter? For example, heavy wind or cold weather?
Yeah, limiting. We just had this situation last tour at work, which was cold weather temperatures. So when do you not fly? We were limited with certain aircraft to minus 30 degrees Celsius. And that was due to potential freezing of the fuel. So gelling of the diesel fuel, jet fuel equivalent, diesel equivalent. So similar consistency to diesel, jet A. So yeah, cold weather and high winds, definitely for some operations, definitely for the stuff we're doing. You'll be restricted to mainly wind gusts. Maximum wind would be, I don't know, if it's steady, we can still work at 30 knots. But it's a wind gust spread, really. so that you can keep the aircraft stable or not. So yeah, wind, freezing rain, like freezing fog, definitely no go for us with the machines we fly. That's definite no go. The ice buildup with the helicopters can happen really quick, which isn't good.
Hello Tofu is a new person. Good to see you. What was a memorable life lesson you learned from your work?
This was probably one back doing rescue operations in Nepal when I first went there, which was thinking that I was going to save everyone for some reason. I don't know, maybe I had a bit of a hero mentality, but coming to the realization that after getting myself and a ground helper into a situation where we were kind of stuck in a valley, a very tight gorge, with a helicopter in milky cloud, and then thinking that we may have to hover next to a tree until the fuel ran out, and then likely flame out, descend into a gorge. After I picked up this Asian lady from a camp up towards Annapurna range, and my realization at that point, while I was hovering next to treetops in this gorge, wondering if we were going to find somewhere to land in time before the fuel ran out, was that I would never get myself into a situation again and jeopardize myself and somebody else on board to rescue somebody that had already made a decision to put themselves in a certain situation. So if a climber went up and I could rescue them safely, of course, but I was never going to push any boundaries to get them back out, because they'd made their own choices to be there, and those choices have consequences. So it was basically to just slow down on the rescues, I think, which was a good lesson. Good lesson, lucky to get away with it in a way. My ground crew helper, he found a ledge, which was kind of a little bench area, like a crop bench that you see lots of in Nepal for the farmers there. We managed to get the helicopter on that and wait out the weather, which was lucky. Mm-hmm. I think you were in Nepal at the time.
Yeah, I was there, and then
it was a stressful week that week. It was like there was a lot of stuff, bad weather,
because there was that wind blowing you.
Oh yeah, that wasn't good.
Yeah, I remember you'd get back and be like, "Yeah, I had a hard day." It's like that's an understatement. I have one, even though this isn't about me, but a memorable life lesson learned from work. So when I was working as a medic, and I would be waiting for calls, so it was kind of in a more backcountry scenario, and I would always sit there and run scenarios through my mind, trying to figure out what I thought was going to happen that day, what I needed to be ready for. And I'm sure anyone who's done that kind of work can relate, where you sit there and you think, okay, I wonder if, is someone going to collapse? Is this going to happen? And the thing that ends up happening is never, ever what you predict is going to happen. I think it's similar in preparedness, where we often think of these scenarios, but really it's going through them over and over and over can be not the best use of time, because whatever you think is going to happen isn't what happens. So all I took from that is just trying to practice my skills, and then just try to let those thoughts go and not worry too much about it. Sun Owl is wondering, are you able to do all types of maintenance on a helicopter? Is it a requirement as a pilot?
No, I'm not able to do all types of maintenance. I'm not certified as an aircraft maintenance engineer. My qualifications are limited to flying. We do have elementary task maintenance as a flight crew that we're allowed to do with specific training on each aircraft type. So there's little things we're allowed to do. I wouldn't say tinker with, but we're allowed to, change certain things on the aircraft and sign off on stuff, but not scheduled and heavy maintenance. No, you have to be an aircraft maintenance engineer, certainly in Canada anyway.
Jean sent a super sticker. Thank you so much, Jean.
Wow.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. That was very kind of you, and not necessary, but very, very kind. Are you gonna head out, or do you have another minute?
No, I can say.
Okay. Daniel had a point. Add cayenne pepper to your diet during the winter. It promotes a super dose of blood flow to your extremities. Thus, your digits will remain functional with very little pain. Okay. I did not know that. Daniel is saying logic is the best hero. And Prepper Dog is also saying he knows some people you could drop off at Mount Everest. And Cold War preppers mentioned loose, powdery snow would be dangerous.
Yeah, loose, powdery snow is difficult to land and take off in, for sure. Heli ski operations, you have that moment where you're coming into the stakes, the landing stakes, and the downwash hits the ground and everything goes white just for a moment or two. So that's why you've got to keep the controls steady and just basically allow the helicopters to settle into the snow. But yeah, keeping reference, definitely key for helicopter flying for the stuff we do. Maintain that fixed reference point so you know which is up and down, especially in the winter.
Daniel is saying a wide variety of skills will be valuable in a grid down scenario. As ammo and fuel deplete, life will regress towards 19th to 20th century technology. What do you think?
Yeah, that would be the case for sure. Yeah.
And
I don't know if we'll ever get to that, but who knows?
Yep. Prepper 101. Helicopter pilots are useless during SHTF. Have they seen the movie Road Warriors? Man, that heli pilot saved the day. I think the big thing with all this is there's different skills and different people have different skills, but not one skill is like the best skill, or, and a person doesn't need to have all the skills. I think that's sort of a thing that people...
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, my helicopter skills is a means of making money. It's a job. It's not, I'm not limited to those skills solely. It's just a means of income. So yeah, I think it's good to be well-rounded, like, be able to do a lot of stuff. Like flying a helicopter is just a, it's one thing of many, many things anyone can do.
Mark Wildman is wondering if you've had any challenging encounters in the air.
Yeah, I mean, there's always stuff that is challenging. I mean, even just coming across from Ontario to Alberta on a couple of weeks ago before the holidays, just flying through winter conditions, navigating winter storms, icing conditions. There's always stuff to consider. There's always challenges unless you're flying on a beautiful blue still day with the sun and no wind, and yeah, there's always stuff to consider.
Oh, secret stuff. Hey, secret stuff. There's a good one. What can a person do to prepare? Oh, this is great. Prepare the ground for a helicopter coming in to make it easier for landing.
Well, that's a good question. Not many people ask that. In fact, very few people. So preparation for landing. So you can imagine getting a huge fan and seeing what would be displaced if you were to put that on the ground, like what would be blown around. You get helicopters, depending on the size of the aircraft, anywhere from, say, the smaller ones to 3,000 pounds in weight to 12,000 plus 20,000 pounds in weight. Well, for that aircraft to be in the air, that amount of displaced air is pushed down with the rotor system to keep that aircraft in the air. So simple stuff would be making sure that there's enough space, physical space, for an aircraft landing. Like a good amount would be, 100 feet by 100 feet is going to get most aircraft. Most, normal size helicopters could get in. Once you're getting into the heavy helicopters, you'd need probably 250 feet by 250 feet to get those in. flat-ish ground. There's only a certain amount of slope that they can physically land on safely. Some of them are limited to around, lateral 4 or 5 degrees, upslope, maybe upslope, landing upslope would be 10 degrees maximum slope. Rocks, stumps, sticks, anything that's going to obstruct the skids, the skis, the landing gear, wheeled aircraft, plus the tail rotor, so nothing wants to be sticking up, so it would protrude under the skin, puncturing tanks. So basically a flat-ish surface, no sticks and stumps to land on, if ideally, and debris, like so that the aircraft doesn't blow, bags, garbage, anything like that that's going to get sucked up at that point into the rotor system itself and cause foreign object damage, FOD damage to the aircraft blades, skins, engines, and such. So quite a lot to consider, I guess. But I think if there's a situation where people are getting rescued and there's been some calamity and such, you're looking at getting rid of debris. And people. Some people that don't understand aircraft, I've seen it a number of times outside of Canada where people approach the helicopter that they shouldn't because they don't know. They just think it's a vehicle. They'll approach it from any angle and they can walk straight into a tail rotor. Like if you get a lot of people trying to get onto a helicopter or don't know and swarm around it while it's still running, very, very dangerous.
Can you tell us, now I'm asking my own questions, but can you tell us what people in Nepal would do in the villages? Oh
yeah, they'd all try and get in the helicopter to try and get a lift. We'd slang.
It's not funny.
Yeah, I'd have start of the day. I'd have a crew at a staging area down in the valley, say, and then we'd have one or two guys that I'd fly up to where we're taking the equipment to, and it could be like 30 miles up valleys and obviously huge elevation gain. Drop them at these communities to receive the cargo loads that we were slinging up, material, building material, whatever it might be, hydroelectric material. And every time I'd land to expedite my trip back down the valley, I'd land after I dropped a sling load off, pack up my net or whatever sling equipment, my long line, and put it in the aircraft and take it back down with me so I could go faster. And at that point, people would try and get a lift down the valley because it may take them, 4, 5, 6, 7 days to commute that distance. So they'd all want to try and get on the helicopter and get a free ride back to where I was from, basing out of. So we try and take as many as we could, within reason. For the seating capacity of the helicopter, but they'd always try and push it. They'd always try and get as many as they physically could just in the aircraft, whether it was on a seat with a seatbelt or not. Plus, they would want to load all their cargo that they'd want to sell. So in Nepal, the mountain villages used to grow really good quality potatoes. And these women would turn up to the helicopter and try and stuff these bags inside of the aircraft. And I'd be like, oh, that's, it's a fairly big bag. And this woman looks like she's struggling with this, pushing it into a cargo compartment on her own that they've, opened themselves because they've seen the machinery often enough. And these bags of potatoes are like, 60, 70 pound bags. So all of a sudden it's like these people are fully overloading the helicopter and I won't be able to take off at altitude. So it was an ongoing thing.
So bringing it back to Secret Stuff's question about preparing the ground for the helicopter coming in, and you just sort of answered it with all the people trying to get in. Are there any things that are annoying that people do? Having been a person picked up many times myself, would it be things like not giving you clear instructions?
Yeah, I mean, if there's like a number of things you want to check off on a list, a scenario would be if say you're on a hilltop and you've sprained your ankle and you need to get picked up by an aircraft. You've been able to get an SOS out either by a GPS Garmin or a satellite phone, and you're expecting an aircraft to come in and pick you up. There's a number of things like clear the area, get yourself to an open space as best possible that you're going to be visible. The aircraft might come in with a line, a retractable hoist to pick somebody up. They might land to pick you up. They might do a long line rescue with a rescuer on the end. So you want to be visibly, best possible, visibly visible from the aircraft. If you have the ability, put up something that's going to give assistance to the air crew for wind direction, ideally. So put up a jacket, a flag, or if you have a small fire going, it's good for signaling where you are, plus gives a good wind direction. Clearing the slope and area, and basically just securing everything around you so things don't blow around. If the helicopter's coming into land to pick you up physically, stay still. Stay still, don't move around. Get yourself to one point away from the landing site itself. And then if you are, asked to approach the aircraft, be in a crouch position, move slowly, make sure any loose articles of clothing or anything you're holding onto is secured. It's not going to blow up. And if you're not sure, just stand still, or kneel, crouch, stay still. And if there's a number of crew on board, they will come and get you. If you don't know what you're doing, don't make a mistake of doing something incorrectly. Don't guess. If you don't know, stand still, and somebody will come and direct you.
And just expect it's going to be windy and loud.
Yeah.
Because some people, it's loud, and then they're like, ah.
Yeah, it's very noisy, very windy, and people, it's difficult to simulate for somebody that's never experienced it. So.
Okay, we are going to wrap up here shortly, but penny pinching prepper, what's the funnest aircraft you've ever flown and why?
I quite like and this was going back a few years when I was starting out flying, the Robinson R-22, which is a 4-cylinder piston engine helicopter made by the recently deceased Frank Robinson, an American pioneer in the helicopter industry. He developed a small training aircraft that was utilized in Australia and New Zealand for training purposes and agricultural use for rounding up cows is what we used them for, aerial cattle mustering. And it was like a 2-seater go-kart. It was just a fun little helicopter to learn how to fly and to work with for a number of years. It was very, it was fun. It was a neat thing to fly.
Thank you for the positive words, Daniel. And thank you, all of you guys who are here. It's great to see you, Thorhaven and Uncle Al and Martin and Ark Wildman and everyone. Really appreciate your time. Somebody had asked too if you flew any of the bigger machines. Yeah,
I do. The biggest category I fly right now is a Bell Mediums, which is a Bell 212, 205 or Bell 212s, which is, for utility work or firefighting.
Cold War Prepper is wondering, do companies intentionally avoid potential negative transfer? Do you know what that means? No. I don't know what that means. And then, could you elaborate? Thorhaven Farm was wondering which countries that we've been to have the best and worst coffee. That's probably the most important question so far. I will say, Mr. Alp can answer in a second, but I will say that I was surprised at how common instant coffee is in certain places, like in England, where it's not looked down upon as less of a choice. Whereas I feel like in Canada, it's sort of a second choice.
That's the same in Australia, really. Mm-hmm. It's instant coffee is more of a thing. Like I'd never really seen coffee jugs, like pots of coffee, until I came to Canada. So best and worst places for coffee. I spent time in China like a few years back and couldn't get a coffee. Other than the stuff I took with me, but really hard to get a coffee there. So that's a non-event. Some of the coffees in Nepal were okay, but again, a lot of instant coffees there too. So, yeah.
Cold War Prepper was saying used to controls in one aircraft and they're different in another aircraft.
Yeah, instruments are different. Controls, the physical controls within, I'll say aircraft. My knowledge is within helicopters. The physical controls are the same. How they function and operate. The manual controls, like the cyclic, the collective, the pedals, they operate the same. They function the same, or they do the same thing in each aircraft. Around that, you've got the systems. So the systems will be different and aircraft specific. So that's maybe what he was thinking.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I think that, creative redundancy is balancing weight. Oh, nice to see you, CR. Hey, here's a wave. Is balancing weight important?
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's the center of gravity, CFG loading of the helicopter. It is important. It's basically whatever goes around. Imagine this is the mast of the helicopter and this is the rotor system up here. So you got the front of the aircraft. You want to make sure it's as even as possible loaded around the mast itself. If you go too far forward, lateral or aft, as you're loading up the aircraft, whether it be personnel, cargo, whatever it might be, you've got to maintain the CFG limits, and that's manufacturer limits. When they design the helicopter, they have basically an operating manual for do's and don'ts and how to operate the aircraft. You've got to keep it within those center of gravity CFG limitations. Reason being, if you're to have a failure of the aircraft, you're not going to have, if you're operating outside of those parameters, you're not going to have the correct controllability in a certain failure to put the aircraft down. The helicopter is going to lean too far one way, or your cyclic or collective controls are going to run out of travel to do what you need to do to the helicopter to land properly. So yeah, it's very important.
And when I would go out and do work, they would measure our weight, sometimes with the bigger companies, and that would be like with boots, clothes, backpacks, everything. And so just saying what our body weight was not adequate. And I feel like Secret Stuff would appreciate that, because it would measure exactly how much that backpack weighed, which is important for covering ground. We are wrapping up here, but Prepper 101, during SHTF, could you use regular gasoline in a helicopter?
Helicopters have a certain amount of tolerance for different fuel types. And this is, again, in the operations manual of each aircraft. It'll give you like an amount, alternative types of fuel you can put in the tank in emergency situations. So good example would be, flying up in the Arctic, Canadian Arctic, and you go in between camps, remote exploration camps, and you run short of fuel. But in one camp you can reach, they have a drum of diesel, for example, not jet fuel. You can use that diesel, but you have to note how much, what hours it was used within the aircraft's life cycle, because you're only allowed a certain tolerance of hours on alternate fuels. Gasoline, if it was mixed, like if it was half a tank of gasoline and half a tank of diesel, maybe. But gasoline is it's far more explosive than kerosene type fuel. The ignition point is just totally different. I would say diesel, yes. Gasoline, I don't think I'd do that.
And for anyone who doesn't know, what kind of fuel does a helicopter use?
Jet A normally, or depending if it's a piston aircraft, it would be gasoline, just like a car, like avgas.
Hey Fabian, good to see you. Yeah, we appreciate you guys being here, especially anyone who's still here. We'll end with one last question, which is probably the most critical, important question from Uncle Al, which is, have you ever dropped a good cup of coffee in flight?
I'm just trying to think. I think I probably have. Yeah, because I tend to put my travel cup on the floor, and I think there's been a couple of times in turbulence where it's probably tipped and knocked the lid off or something. So I would say yes. That's annoying.
That would be tragic.
Yeah.
It's like a mini SHTF.
It is, yeah. In-flight emergency.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, again, thanks for all of your time. It's much appreciated. And yeah, penny pinching. Well, thank you for being here. Thanks, Sassy Gal. You guys are awesome. Good to see you. And with that, we are
Thank you very much.
out.
Nice to chat with everybody, and appreciate everyone's time listening to us today. Thanks, and happy holidays.
Yeah. Happy holidays. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.